The massive detention center on Kepler Station hummed with the low vibration of alien technology. Commander Sarah Chen hung suspended in energy shackles that pulsed with a sickly purple light, her wrists and ankles bound by restraints designed to hold beings far stronger than any human. The Galactic Defense Council had made sure of that when they captured her 3 months ago. Around her cell, guards from a dozen different species wandered past with casual indifference. The towering Vrex, with their crystalline exoskeletons, clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter. The serpentine Naga slithered by, their forked tongues tasting the air with obvious disdain. Even the smaller Zephyrian bird people ruffled their colorful feathers in dismissive gestures whenever they caught sight of the human prisoner. Sarah had been the first human to achieve the rank of commander in the Galactic Defense Fleet. Her species had only joined the galactic community 15 years ago, and most aliens still viewed humans as primitive newcomers. The fact that she had earned her position through merit rather than political connections made her success even more threatening to the established order. The charges against her were fabricated, of course. Treason, they claimed. Conspiracy to undermine galactic security. The real crime was being human and being too good at her job. When the Hegemony War broke out between the major galactic powers, Sarah had developed tactics that saved millions of lives and turned the tide of several crucial battles. That success had made her enemies among the alien command structure. General Thok, a massive Vrex whose crystal shell bore the scars of 100 battles, entered her cell with his usual retinue of sycophants. His compound eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction as he studied the bound human. "Still maintaining your innocence, Primitive?" Thok's voice resonated through the translator implants all galactic citizens carried. "Your pathetic species should have remained in their home system where they belonged." Sarah met his gaze without flinching. During her time as a Navy SEAL on Earth, she had endured interrogations by some of the toughest operators on the planet. This alien bully was nothing compared to the crucible that had forged her into one of humanity's deadliest warriors. "My tactical innovations saved the lives of soldiers from every species in this station," Sarah replied calmly. "Including Vrex soldiers under your own command." Thok's mandibles clicked in anger. He gestured to one of his aides, a sleek Naga named Seth, whose scales shifted color with emotion. "Show her the execution order." The serpentine alien slithered forward, producing a holographic document that materialized in the air between them. Sarah scanned the text, noting the official seals and signatures. Tomorrow at dawn, she would be publicly executed as a war criminal. The message was clear. Humans needed to remember their place in the galactic hierarchy. "Any last words, mammal?" Thok asked, clearly expecting her to beg for mercy or break down in despair. Instead, Sarah smiled. It was a predator's smile, cold and calculating. During her years in special operations, she had learned that true strength came not from physical power, but from the will to endure and adapt. The aliens had made a critical error in their assessment of human capabilities. "You know what I learned during my time on the front lines?" Sarah asked conversationally. "Every species in the galaxy has evolved some remarkable ability. The Vrex have their crystal armor. The Naga have their speed and flexibility. The Zephyrians can fly through vacuum for short periods." Thok leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "And humans? What is your species' remarkable ability?" "We break things," Sarah said simply. "We excel at breaking things that everyone else thinks are unbreakable." The general's laughter boomed through the cell. "These energy shackles are constructed from quantum phase technology. They're designed to contain beings with the strength of a Titan-class warrior. No human has ever possessed such physical power." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "You're absolutely right about human physical limitations, but you've made the same mistake that cost your forces so dearly during the Hegemony War. You're thinking about this problem the wrong way." Over the following hours, As the alien guards settled into their night rotation, Sarah began her work. The other prisoners in the detention center were mostly political dissidents and captured enemy soldiers. They had all heard stories about the human commander who had humiliated the galactic military establishment, but none had ever seen her in action. What they witnessed that night would become legend. Sarah had spent her captivity carefully observing every detail of her prison. The energy shackles operated on a frequency rotation system, cycling through different quantum phases to prevent any single species from adapting to them. But the designers had made one crucial assumption, that prisoners would try to overcome the restraints through brute force. Humans, however, had a long history of asymmetric problem-solving. During her Navy SEAL training, Sarah had learned that every system had vulnerabilities. The art of escape and evasion wasn't about being stronger than your captors, it was about being smarter. She had memorized the frequency patterns of her shackles, timed the guard rotations, and identified the weak points in the detention center's security grid. The quantum restraints were indeed unbreakable by conventional means. But they operated on a closed-loop energy system that required periodic recalibration. For exactly 17 seconds every 6 hours, the shackles reduced their power output to cycle through their quantum phase alignment. Sarah had been waiting 3 months for the perfect moment to exploit that 17-second window. As the station entered its artificial night cycle, she began the careful process of dislocating her shoulder. It was an agonizing procedure that she had learned during escape and evasion training. The human joint structure was remarkably flexible compared to most alien species, and with enough determination, a skilled operator could temporarily compress their profile enough to slip through restraints designed for bulkier alien anatomies. The first phase of her escape required absolute silence and precise timing. As the shackles entered their recalibration cycle, Sarah compressed her injured shoulder and twisted her arm through the energy field. The quantum restraints flickered, confused by the sudden change in their target's dimensional profile. 17 seconds wasn't enough time to fully escape, but it was enough to begin the process. Night after night, Sarah worked at weakening the shackles' grip. She used micro-movements and pressure adjustments that wouldn't trigger the security sensors. Each session left her in excruciating pain, but she endured it with the same mental discipline that had carried her through the most dangerous missions on Earth. The alien guards never suspected that their primitive human prisoner was systematically dismantling the most advanced containment system in the galaxy. On the night before her scheduled execution, Sarah finally achieved what 3 months of careful planning had been building toward. As the shackles entered their recalibration cycle, she slipped free of her bonds with fluid grace that would have impressed her old SEAL instructors. But escaping her cell was only the beginning of her plan. The detention center held over 200 prisoners, including dozens of soldiers who had fought alongside her during the HFY War. Many were there because they had supported her tactical innovations or spoken out against the corruption in the galactic command structure. If she was going to break out, she wasn't going alone. Sarah moved through the corridors like a ghost, using every stealth technique in her extensive repertoire. The alien guards were complacent after months of routine, and their security protocols were designed to detect the obvious escape methods that other species might employ. They weren't prepared for a human operator who could move with lethal silence and think several steps ahead of their countermeasures. The first guard she encountered was a young Zephyrian on his routine patrol. Sarah disabled him with a sleeper hold that cut off blood flow to his brain without triggering any of the medical alarms built into his uniform. She carefully positioned his unconscious body to look like he had simply dozed off during his shift. Within 2 hours, she had neutralized 8 guards and gained access to the central security hub. The command console was a marvel of alien engineering, but Sarah had spent years studying galactic technology. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface, disabling force fields and opening cell doors throughout the facility. As alarms finally began to sound, Sarah stood in the center of the detention complex and activated the facility's general communication system. Her voice echoed through every speaker in the station. "This is Commander Sarah Chen. For too long, this corrupt system has used fear and intimidation to silence anyone who threatens their power. Tonight, we remind them that some chains can't hold the human spirit." Throughout the facility, cell doors burst open and prisoners poured into the corridors. But this wasn't a chaotic riot. Sarah had spent months mentally cataloging every prisoner's skills and background. She knew exactly which individuals could be trusted with which responsibilities. Within minutes, her improvised force had secured key strategic points throughout the station. The same tactical brilliance that had made her legendary during the war was now being applied to the most audacious prison break in galactic history. General Thok arrived at the detention center with a full squadron of armed guards, expecting to find a panicking human prisoner begging for mercy. Instead, he found the facility completely under her control, and every single political prisoner free from their cells. Sarah stood waiting for him in the main corridor, no longer the shackled captive he had mocked just hours before. She wore the confident bearing of a warrior who had never truly been defeated, only temporarily inconvenienced. "Impossible," Thok breathed, his crystal shell resonating with disbelief. "The quantum restraints were unbreakable." "You were right about one thing," Sarah replied with that same predator's smile. "Humans don't have the physical strength to break those shackles with brute force. But we've never needed brute force when intelligence and determination work so much better." The standoff in the main corridor stretched taut as a wire ready to snap. General Thok's compound eyes glittered with rage as he surveyed the impossible scene before him. Every prisoner in the facility stood free, organized into disciplined squads that moved with military precision. At their center, Commander Sarah Chen waited with the calm confidence of someone who held all the cards. "Surrender immediately, and I might consider reducing your sentence to life imprisonment," Thok growled, his crystal shell resonating with barely contained fury. Behind him, 24 elite guards raised their plasma rifles, the weapons humming with lethal energy. Sarah's laugh echoed through the corridor, causing several aliens to step back involuntarily. There was something predatory about the sound that triggered deep survival instincts across multiple species. "General, you still don't understand what you're dealing with," she said, gesturing to the freed prisoners around her. "You see a riot. I see the most experienced combat veterans from 6 different galactic conflicts, united by a common cause. Tell me, how many of your guards have actual combat experience?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Most of the station security force consisted of young recruits who had never faced real warfare. They were trained to handle civilian disturbances and routine prisoner transport, not a coordinated operation led by one of the galaxy's most decorated tactical commanders. Thok's mandibles clicked nervously as he realized the strategic disadvantage he faced. The prisoners weren't panicking or making demands. They were positioning themselves with the methodical efficiency of soldiers preparing for battle. Every movement suggested careful planning and unified command. "You're trapped on this station with nowhere to run," he said, trying to regain psychological control of the situation. "Surrender now, and I'll ensure your followers receive fair treatment." "Actually, I have a better proposal," Sarah replied. She activated a portable holographic projector that displayed the station's current tactical situation. "Your security forces are spread thin across 47 different sectors. My people have secured the primary power grid, the communications hub, and the docking bay control systems. We also have hostages." Thok's shell crystalline structure flickered with alarm. "What hostages?" "Your senior staff. About an hour ago, my advanced team secured the administrative levels. Your second-in-command, your chief of security, and your political liaison are all enjoying the same hospitality you showed us." Sarah's smile turned coldly professional. "The difference is that we're not torturing them for information or planning their executions." The revelation sent shockwaves through the gathered guards. Several of them began glancing at each other with visible uncertainty. The idea that prisoners had outmaneuvered their supposedly superior security apparatus was almost incomprehensible. "This is what human tactical thinking looks like, General," Sarah continued. "While you were focused on making examples of us, we were studying your weaknesses. Every guard rotation, every security protocol, every administrative procedure. You gave us 3 months to plan, and we used every minute of it." Captain Zrak, a massive Rex who served as Thok's chief enforcer, stepped forward with his plasma cannon raised. "Enough talk. We end this now." The weapon began charging with a high-pitched whine that echoed through the corridor. But before Zrak could fire, Sarah's hand moved in a blur of motion. A makeshift projectile crafted from repurposed detention equipment struck the cannon's charging chamber with perfect accuracy. The weapon discharged prematurely, sending a bolt of superheated plasma into the ceiling instead of its intended target. "Human reflexes," Sarah explained to the stunned aliens. "We evolved as persistence hunters on a world filled with predators. Our reaction times and hand-eye coordination are exceptional." What happened next would be discussed in galactic military academies for decades to come. Sarah had done more than simply plan an escape. She had orchestrated a masterpiece of psychological warfare. The freed prisoners began moving in coordinated patterns that demonstrated their complete control over the facility. They weren't just escapees anymore. They were an organized military force operating on their home ground. Lieutenant Commander Voss, a Naga who had served under Sarah during the Hegemony War, slithered up to report the latest developments. "All primary systems secured, Commander. We have control of life support, artificial gravity, and external communications. The docking bay is locked down, and we've disabled the emergency beacon." Thok's shell resonated with a low harmonic that indicated extreme stress. He was beginning to understand the true scope of what the humans had accomplished. This wasn't a desperate escape attempt. It was a calculated military operation that had turned his own station against him. "You cannot hold this position indefinitely," he said, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "The Galactic Defense Council will send reinforcements." "Will they?" Sarah asked, activating another holographic display. "Because according to these communication logs, you've been reporting that everything here is running smoothly. No incidents, no security concerns, no reasons for anyone to investigate this facility." The general's compound eyes widened as he recognized his own daily reports to Fleet Command. For 3 months, he had been so confident in his prisoner's helplessness that he had assured his superiors that the detention center required no additional oversight. "We've been monitoring all outgoing communications," Sarah explained. "Every status report, every supply requisition, every personnel rotation. Your superiors believe this facility is operating exactly as planned. They have no reason to send reinforcements because they don't know anything is wrong." Dr. Keth, an elderly Zephyrian scientist who had been imprisoned for criticizing the government's war crimes, fluttered his wings in what passed for applause among his species. "Remarkable strategic thinking, Commander. You've isolated them from their support structure using their own arrogance against them." The psychological pressure on Thok and his guards was immense. They found themselves trapped in a situation that defied all their assumptions about human capabilities. The prisoners were no longer acting like victims. They were demonstrating the kind of tactical sophistication that had made human forces legendary during the recent conflicts. Sarah stepped closer to the general, her movements fluid and controlled. "Here's what's going to happen. Thok, you're going to order your guards to stand down and report to designated holding areas. In exchange, I'll guarantee their safety and ensure they're treated according to galactic prisoner protocols." "And if I refuse?" Thok asked, though they both knew he had already lost this confrontation. "Then my people will implement Phase 2 of our operation," Sarah replied. "We've identified 17 critical vulnerabilities in this station's structural integrity. With the right application of force in the right locations, we could cause a cascade failure that would cripple this facility for months. The threat wasn't empty bluster. During her captivity, Sarah had used her engineering knowledge to analyze every aspect of the station's construction. She understood exactly how to inflict maximum damage with minimal resources, a skill that had served her well during her covert operations career. Thok's shell resonated with defeat as he realized he had no viable options. His security force was outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and outclassed by opponents who understood the tactical situation better than he did. Continuing to resist would only result in casualties among his own people. "Very well," he said finally, his voice hollow with resignation. "Guards, stand down and report to the designated areas." The surrender took less than an hour to complete. Sarah's people processed the station security forces with the same efficient professionalism they had demonstrated throughout the operation. No one was harmed, no equipment was unnecessarily destroyed, and all prisoners were treated with dignity and respect. As the last of Thok's guards were secured in temporary holding areas, Sarah stood in the station's main command center and surveyed the results of her carefully planned operation. Around her, the freed prisoners worked at various stations, monitoring communications and maintaining essential systems. They had transformed a detention facility into their own operational headquarters. "Commander," called out Major Drex, a veteran Vrex soldier who had been imprisoned for refusing to participate in civilian bombardments. "We're receiving coded transmissions from several other facilities. Word is spreading about what happened here." Sarah nodded, understanding the larger implications of their success. The detention center on Kepler Station wasn't just a prison. It was a symbol of the galactic power structure's ability to silence opposition. By taking control of it, they had sent a message that would resonate throughout the galaxy. "Open a channel to Galactic Defense Command," she ordered. "It's time to begin the next phase of our operation." The communication array activated, sending a priority signal across the galactic network. Within minutes, high-ranking officials from dozens of worlds would be scrambling to understand how a human prisoner had accomplished the impossible. But Sarah wasn't concerned with their reactions. She had bigger plans in motion. "This is Commander Sarah Chen, addressing the Galactic Defense Council from Kepler Station," she announced over the open channel. "I'm here to inform you that the charges against myself and my fellow prisoners were fabricated by corrupt officials who feared our success on the battlefield. We have evidence of war crimes, illegal detention, and systematic abuse of power." The response was immediate and chaotic. Emergency communication protocols activated across the galaxy as military and political leaders tried to process what they were hearing. The idea that a human prisoner could seize control of a maximum security facility and broadcast demands to the entire galactic government was beyond their understanding. But Sarah wasn't making demands. She was announcing the beginning of a revolution. The emergency session of the Galactic Defense Council convened within 6 hours of Sarah's broadcast, bringing together representatives from 47 worlds in a state of barely controlled panic. The massive chamber on the capital world of Nexus Prime buzzed with agitated conversations in dozens of languages as military leaders and political officials struggled to comprehend the crisis. High Admiral Zenth, a distinguished Zephyrian, whose iridescent feathers marked him as a member of the Old Guard, called for order with sharp clicks of his beak. His species had dominated galactic politics for centuries, and the idea that a single human could threaten their authority was almost incomprehensible. "The situation on Kepler Station represents an unprecedented security breach," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "We must respond with overwhelming force to demonstrate that such actions will not be tolerated." Admiral Korax, a battle-scarred Naga whose scales bore the marks of a dozen conflicts, coiled his serpentine body as he prepared to speak. "With respect, High Admiral, This isn't a simple prison riot. Commander Chen has demonstrated tactical capabilities that exceed those of our best military strategists. A direct assault would result in significant casualties. The chamber erupted in heated debate as representatives argued over the appropriate response. Some called for immediate military intervention, while others urged caution. The humans had only been part of the galactic community for 15 years, but their impact on military doctrine had been revolutionary. In the midst of the chaos, a priority communication signal cut through all other transmissions. Every screen in the chamber displayed the same image: Commander Sarah Chen standing in the command center of Kepler Station, her bearing calm and confident despite the magnitude of what she had accomplished. "Honored members of the Galactic Defense Council," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced audio systems. "I'm transmitting from Kepler Station, which is now under the control of personnel who were illegally detained on fabricated charges." High Admiral Zent's feathers ruffled with indignation. "You are a convicted war criminal who has committed acts of terrorism against a galactic facility. Surrender immediately, and you will be granted a fair trial." Sarah's smile was sharp as a blade. "Admiral, I have in my possession the complete records of General Thok's communications with your office. Would you like me to broadcast his requests for permission to execute prisoners without trial, or perhaps his reports on the interrogation techniques being used here?" The chamber fell silent as the implications of her statement sank in. Several representatives exchanged nervous glances, understanding that the human had just revealed knowledge that could destroy careers and topple governments. "You're bluffing," Zenth said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Captain Voss, please transmit data package Alpha to all council members," Sarah ordered. Within seconds, every representative's personal communicator chimed with an incoming file transfer. The documents that appeared on their screens told a story of systematic corruption, illegal detention, and abuse of power that reached the highest levels of the galactic government. Admiral Korax studied the files with growing alarm, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air as stress pheromones filled his system. These communication logs show clear evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. If authentic, they implicate dozens of high-ranking officials. "They're authentic," Sarah confirmed, "and they're only a small sample of what we've discovered. For 3 months, General Thok believed he was dealing with helpless prisoners. He never imagined that we were documenting every illegal order, every fabricated report, every act of corruption that kept this system running." The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives began examining the evidence in detail. The documents revealed a network of corruption that extended far beyond Kepler Station, implicating military leaders, political officials, and corporate executives across multiple sectors of the galaxy. High Counselor Vythe, an ancient being whose species had helped found the galactic government, activated his personal communication array to speak directly with Sarah. His appearance was unsettling to most other species, resembling a massive brain encased in a translucent shell, but his intellect was legendary throughout the galaxy. "Commander Chen," he said, his telepathic voice resonating through the chamber's mental interface systems, "you have presented compelling evidence of systematic corruption. What are your intentions regarding this information?" Sarah had been waiting for this question. She understood that true victory required more than simply exposing the crimes. She needed to offer a path forward that served the greater good of the galactic community. "Counselor Vith, my intention is to ensure that justice is served and that the systems designed to protect galactic citizens actually function as intended," she replied. "The prisoners on this station include some of the most decorated veterans from recent conflicts. We were imprisoned not because we committed crimes, but because we threatened the power structure that allowed these abuses to occur." Behind the scenes, emergency communications were flying between government officials as the full scope of the crisis became clear. The evidence Sarah had presented was authentic and damning, but the political ramifications of acknowledging it would be catastrophic for the current power structure. General Krex, a massive Titan-class warrior whose species was known for their direct approach to problem-solving, stepped forward with his usual lack of diplomatic subtlety. The simplest solution is to destroy the station and eliminate the problem permanently. We cannot allow this precedent to stand. The suggestion sent shockwaves through the chamber, but Sarah had anticipated this response. Her next words carried across the communication channel with deadly certainty. "General, are you familiar with the human concept of a dead man's switch?" she asked. "We've distributed complete copies of our evidence to 17 different locations throughout the galaxy. Any attempt to destroy this station or harm the people here will result in the automatic release of information that will bring down your entire government." The threat wasn't empty. During her months of captivity, Sarah had used her network of contacts to establish secure communication channels with journalists, military reformists, and political dissidents across multiple worlds. If anything happened to her or her people, the corruption scandal would explode across the galactic media network within hours. Counselor Vith's mental presence radiated approval as he processed the elegant sophistication of her strategy. "You have constructed a scenario where violence becomes counterproductive for your opponents. Impressive tactical thinking, Commander." "It's more than tactics, Counselor," Sarah replied. "It's about creating a future where military personnel can serve with honor instead of being used as tools by corrupt politicians. The evidence we've gathered shows that countless soldiers have died in unnecessary conflicts designed to enrich specific individuals rather than protect galactic citizens." Her words resonated through the chamber as representatives began to understand the broader implications of what she was revealing. The corruption wasn't just about illegal detention. It was about the systematic abuse of military forces for personal gain. Admiral Korax coiled his serpentine body as he studied the tactical situation from multiple angles. "Commander, what specific changes are you proposing to address these issues?" Sarah activated a holographic display that outlined a comprehensive reform program designed to eliminate the systemic problems that had allowed corruption to flourish. Her proposals included independent oversight committees, transparent reporting requirements, and accountability measures that would make future abuses impossible. These reforms would fundamentally alter the balance of power within the galactic government, she explained. Military personnel would serve under clear ethical guidelines with protection for those who report illegal orders. Political officials would face regular audits of their decisions, and corporate contracts would require public disclosure of all terms and conditions. The chamber buzzed with intense discussions as representatives realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. A human prisoner had not only exposed massive corruption, but had also developed a sophisticated plan to prevent future abuses. Her proposals were comprehensive, practical, and designed to strengthen rather than weaken the galactic government. High Admiral Zenth's feathers dulled with defeat as he recognized the political reality of the situation. The evidence against his administration was overwhelming, and Sarah's strategic positioning made violent suppression impossible. More importantly, her reform proposals offered a way forward that could actually improve the galactic government's effectiveness. "The Council requires time to review your proposals and examine the evidence in detail," he said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. "Of course, Admiral," Sarah replied. "We'll maintain control of Kepler Station until proper oversight can be established. In the meantime, we'll continue documenting any additional evidence we discover and preparing detailed reports on the systemic problems we've identified." As the council session concluded, representatives began the complex process of deciding how to respond to the crisis. Some called for Sarah's immediate pardon and promotion, recognizing her actions as necessary, whistleblowing that had exposed critical problems. Others demanded her prosecution, arguing that her methods had been illegal regardless of their effectiveness. But the political momentum was clearly shifting in Sarah's favor. The evidence she had presented was too compelling to ignore, and her reform proposals offered solutions to problems that had plagued the galactic government for decades. Military personnel across the galaxy began speaking out in support of her actions, and public opinion polls showed overwhelming approval for her demands. 6 weeks after her daring escape from quantum shackles, Commander Sarah Chen stood before the same Galactic Defense Council that had once condemned her to death. But this time, she wore the uniform of a newly appointed Inspector General, tasked with implementing the reforms that would reshape the galaxy's military structure. High Admiral Zenth, who had resigned in disgrace as the full extent of the corruption was revealed, had been replaced by Admiral Korax, who had distinguished himself by supporting Sarah's reform efforts from the beginning. The new administration had embraced transparency and accountability as core principles, transforming the galactic government into something that actually served its citizens. The changes we've implemented over the past year have already prevented 17 potential conflicts and saved an estimated 4 million lives, Sarah reported to the assembled representatives. Military personnel now serve under clear ethical guidelines, and our oversight systems have identified and eliminated corrupt practices that had been operating for decades. As she concluded her report, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had entered alien shackles as a prisoner condemned to die for crimes she had never committed. But by refusing to accept defeat and using her human ingenuity to find solutions that others couldn't imagine, she had transformed not just her own fate, but the entire galaxy. The shackles had been broken, and in their place stood a system based on justice, accountability, and the recognition that true strength came not from dominating others, but from serving something greater than oneself. It was, Sarah thought with satisfaction, a very human kind of victory.